what I do and how I operate and how I work with myself has, while it started out as a form of self-development, but it's evolved into actually a deconstruction of the self.
Mm.
Because what I find is that a core part of what ails society is an overcorrection into being absorbed with our sense of self, being so centered in ourselves, being so obsessed with protecting this fabricated construct known as the self, right? And whether it's this idea of Ryan, whether this is this sense of who Lee is, whether this manufactured definition of what Ani is, it's just a collection of stories. It's a collection of memories and thoughts and perceptions and interpretations. And it also becomes the ultimate prison for each and every human being. And when we identify with this prison, then we immediately create a separation between who lives inside and who lives on the other side, who lives outside, right? And we create a boundary around ourselves. And because we are one speck in this universe, we feel limited. And so the three primary problems of the human being arise. That is a sense of lack, a sense of limitation, and a sense of separation. And all of these come back to this fundamental notion, this fundamental misconception that I am this limited, separate self, right? And that idea, when left unquestioned, is responsible for pretty much all of our suffering. And when we really investigate into that, we find that there's actually nothing there. There's no such thing as Ryan,
yes.
Right? We can define a Ryan right now based on, the context in which we interact as a podcast host, as someone who's a leader in the space. But if we look really deeply, there's no such thing, right? And as we unwind that, right, we dissolve the self, right? And so I want to propose a radically different idea for what we consider self-development, right? As the goal being to deconstruct the self. But also, that's half the story, because I think that's where a lot of the spiritual world lives and dies, right? Because they are obsessed with the spiritual. And I actually think the highest form of spirituality, the highest form of personal evolution, is actually the perfect marriage of the spiritual and the material. We must learn to be in the material world because we are embodied. We are embodied. And to be fully embodied, we must be in this form. We must live and navigate the world of form with some elegance, ideally. So it's, the spiritual, but it's also the material. So it's the deconstruction of the self, but it's also the intentional and conscious reconstruction of the self, right? In our highest form, in our highest potential, to express and experience our most limitless self.